Welcome back to our continuation of the lesson on the production possibilities frontier. In this video, we're going to be looking at a few issues associated with the PPF and what they might look like, what we should be thinking about here. First, how would economic growth or increased efficiency be represented in a PPF? Well, if you become more efficient, remember the PPF shows levels of output. So if you become more efficient, what's that going to mean? That's going to mean PPF should be shifted outward. So what happens to the graph? Let's go to, if we go to a generic looking PPF, well, if you have an increase in efficiency, you would expect your PPF would just be kind of shifted outward. So you'd label, PPF, PPF, and we'll indicate this PPF with an increase arrow, so the PPF would just be shifted outward when you have an increase in efficiency. One thing to note, we just talked about opportunity cost, but the slope of the production possibilities frontier represents the opportunity cost of production. So if we go back to the problem that you did in the last video, if I asked you, what's the opportunity cost of a pizza? The correct answer is, it depends how many pizzas we're currently producing. If you're producing no pizzas, the opportunity cost is different than if you're already producing pizzas, right? If you're producing no pizzas, we see to go from 0 pizzas to 1 pizza, what's the opportunity cost? We give up 10 beers, right? That's the cost for the first pizza. But if you're already producing 3 pizzas and want to produce the 4th, then what's the opportunity cost for a pizza? Well, then it's 35 beers, right? You had 80, you give up 35. From 4 to 5, you give up 45 beers. So depending the slope of the slope of the production possibilities frontier is going to represent the opportunity cost of production, and that will differ at different points of the PPF. So a question that often gets asked is, okay, we have this PPF, what output should be produced? And that's going to depend. It's subjective. If you have a person, if you had the option at all of those levels of pizza and beer, and I presented that to everybody in the class, suspect we're going to get different answers. Well, first, of course, anybody under 21, legally you're not supposed to be drinking beer, so of course you would all pick pizza. But if it is legal to drink beer, some of you might not like it, so you'd pick all pizza anyway. Others, maybe you're, lactose intolerance, right? Cheese, you can't eat cheese. Well, if you can't eat cheese, that would diminish the value of pizza. Maybe you go with all beer. Maybe a lot of you do some combination in between. At this point in the course, right, we're looking at the efficiency in production. Any point on the frontier might be the best combination to produce, as long as you reach the frontier. If you don't reach the frontier, though, that's a different story. If you're inside the frontier, then you're not efficient. And we're going to look at that in just a moment here. So efficiency, we define this in kind of a weird way, but this is the most precise way to define it, and we'll discuss why this is the case. So efficiency, it occurs when you can't produce more of an item without cutting back on the output for another item. And later we're going to be calling something similar Pareto efficiency. So efficiency, you can't increase the output of one item without decreasing the output of another item. Think about the opposite case here. Think about if this definition isn't holding. That means you're at some production level, and you can produce more of something without cutting back on something else. Well, if you can do that, your original point wasn't very good, right? I mean, if you work a day and you could produce so many pizza and beer, and tomorrow you say, what, I can, with everything the same, I could produce more pizza without cutting back on beer. Well, the first day, obviously, you weren't efficient, right? You are efficient if you get to the point where, I'd like to produce some more beer, But in order to do that, of course, I have to give up some pizza, because the only way you'll be able to produce more of one item is to cut back on another item under the constraint we had. Remember, we have limited land, labor, and capital. We're holding that all constant. If you decide to work more hours, that's a different story. That's not holding your labor time constant. So efficiency. You can't increase the output of one item without decreasing the outputs of another item. It's inefficient if you're inside the frontier, and if you're beyond the frontier, we actually call that's a point that's not attainable, given the current levels of land, labor, and capital. So I'm going to open up a new one just to plot out these points. So we have the y-axis and we have the x-axis, and we have a PPF that we'll draw out here. So any point on the frontier could be efficient. So any of these points here could be efficient. Points that are inside the frontier are inefficient. Any point anywhere inside the frontier, these are inefficient points. And maybe I'll put U's for unattainable out here. Any point that's outside is not attainable. You need to come up with a new technology or work more hours, right? Something has to change with the inputs in order to make those, in order to reach those points. So the points on the frontier are efficient. I guess we could put a little E by that. Inside, these are all inefficient. Outside the frontier, these are unattainable. So this point for efficiency is a big one to get. Largely, it is coming up later. The definition, as I mentioned, it is a bit convoluted, but it is important to learn this definition. To be efficient, you can't increase the output of one item without decreasing the output of another item. When could inefficiency occur? Oops, let me scroll back to that previous slide here. Inefficiency could occur when you assign inputs to the wrong tasks. Think if you run a fast food restaurant, you have one person who's great with customers and one person who's a great cook. Well, if you assign the great cook to work with the customers and the great person with customers to be the cook, you could see inefficiencies. You could see it with discrimination as well. A couple of big reasons you could see inefficiency occurring. Here's the PPF, kind of a more well-drawn version of the PPF. Points A, B, E, and F. As a review, what would we call those points? Hoping in your head you realize by now, oh, these are efficient. It's on the frontier. Point C, what would we call this? Well, we'd say this is unattainable. And point D, production's inefficient.